A natural med isn't just a substance you take. It is a lifestyle that one lives to amplify their health. We don't always choose how long we will be on this planet, but we can take action on the quality of life that we wish to enjoy.
The Natural Med podcast interviews different professionals and experts who look at improving the quality of health so they can live a more fulfilling life. Whether that be physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, or spiritually, we discover the secrets to their own journey and the small steps individuals can take on a daily basis to improve the quality of their life. Come with me as we travel, research, and discover how we can make incremental changes on a daily basis to live a more fulfilled and balanced life.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Natural Med podcast. I am Nathan, as always, joined by the ever-popular Nicole Wright, the real talent of the show. And we are here today with Brittany. I'm not going to say her last name.
Brittany Wehrle.
You could have tried. It would have been okay.
It would have been terrible.
Welcome, Brittany, to the show.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into being a registered dietitian and health and wellness and everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Intro.
So my name is Brittany Wehrle. I am originally from Connecticut. I came down to Texas thinking I wanted to be a chemical engineer in college.
Okay.
Ridiculous now that I know myself better. But it did lead me to take a class with a sports dietitian who worked in like pro football. And that sparked kind of my interest in nutrition in a more like professional way. And I just kind of went down the rabbit hole, going to school, doing all the things. I worked in collegiate athletics for 4 years before transitioning to private practice, which is what I do now.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I know I first met you. You're an instructor at Dent Spinco, so that's kind of how we got connected and everything. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And then I found out that you're also a dietitian and help people. So what motivates you to help people kind of with their diet, nutrition, and everything?
Yeah, so when I was young, my dad was diagnosed with diabetes. And so even as a little kid, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the pamphlets that they gave us from the family seminar and things. So I had always kind of had that idea of, this is a really critical piece of people's health.
Yeah.
But I was also a gymnast growing up. And I saw firsthand what underfueling and having my own stuff with food kind of how it hindered me.
Yeah.
So when I took that first class with a sports dietitian, I was like, oh, this is the piece that a lot of athletes are probably missing.
Yeah.
And that belief or that little spark continued to be supported as I started to work with athletes, and we could teach them how to really fuel for performance and for health. And it was just so cool to see them perform better or be more comfortable with food or their bodies, just with a little bit of quality education and support and the cheerleading of it and all of that. Once I got that first job in sports, I was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you still work with a lot of athletes, or is it kind of a mixture, or what does your clientele look like?
So being, like you had mentioned, a fitness instructor as well, I have a lot of clients who are in that fitness realm because I can kind of understand where they're coming from, with having to fuel teaching multiple classes a day and balance a busy lifestyle and all this stuff. So I would say my current clientele is 50%, traditional athletes, and then 50% just active females.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked to a lot of people and, people we interview on the podcast about how much what you eat affects your mental health and just your overall health and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we have a lot of questions for you today about myths and, people want to eat healthy, but sometimes they do a crash diet or
mm-hmm.
a fad diet, and then they get burnout and everything. But I know one thing that I've heard in the past, and I kind of wonder sometimes about it too myself. Well, somebody will start to like eat healthy food, like kind of eat more nutrition food, but they're not like losing the weight or maybe, you know, shedding the pounds or losing the inches. Like, what do you think about that? Like somebody's like, well, now I'm eating more vegetables, but I still weigh the same and everything. So do you get that a lot?
A lot.
Okay.
A lot. And so I always spend a little bit of time with potential clients now that I can, kind of choose who I work with and they can choose me, versus when I was in the collegiate setting, it was like, I'm the dietitian for your team, so you're going to see me. But now that I get to, kind of vet them and vice versa, I definitely take a little time to assess if a client's primary goal is weight loss. I'm probably not the best fit for them, right? Okay. Because if they did all of the things that you just said, they start eating more nutritious food, they are like finding a workout regimen that they really like, they're taking care of their mental health, right? They're prioritizing all of these, what we call like health promoting behaviors in our field, and the scale's not moving. If they ultimately feel like they have failed because that scale hasn't moved, I am going to be over here like cheering for all the great things they're doing for their body, and they're going to be disappointed. Right? So there is definitely an element of, for a lot of people, when you incorporate those behaviors, you might see your body change. But my primary outcome with clients isn't, let's make that scale move. Because I know for some people, that won't end up happening without a lot of extremes, right? A lot of extreme behaviors.
Yeah, that's so true. I know, like, just for me personally, when I tell a lot of people my weight, they're like, you weigh that much? I'm 5'7". I weigh 155. I'm, I have to turn in my weight every quarter because I'm a flight nurse. So I'm like, whatever. But I have some friends that they're like, oh my gosh, I weigh 125 now. And I'm like, oh, you lost weight? And they're like, no, I gained weight. I was like, oh, well, so everybody's so different and everything,
Yes.
and it's interesting. And a lot of people don't see that. They're just, it seems like they're hooked on that number. But
100%.
There's muscle and everything. You gain muscle whenever you start working out. And I don't know, for me, it's like, if clothes fit better, then like, you're toning up and everything. Like, what do you see with that and everything?
Yeah. So a lot of times I see, like, when someone is really focused on the number, I see a lot of opportunity to say, okay, well, let's like assess the other outcomes that you would be excited about, or your values around health. If, I want to be stronger, when I'm working with athletes, like they think that they really, really want that specific weight because maybe a coach used to coach somebody who was a fantastic athlete in their sport, and that person weighed 130. So now they think all their athletes have to weigh 130.
Yeah.
But what I will say is, like, if you can PR, if you can win that race, do you care if you're 130 or 135?
Yeah.
Right?
No,
and
true.
If restricting to the point to get to 130 causes your performance to suffer, are you going to feel now that you are out of line with your values or with your goals? Because if so, then weight loss probably shouldn't be your primary driver. And so if it's like, I want my clothes to feel good, or I want to feel like I am making progress in the gym, or I want to be sleeping better, and I know late night eating is disrupting my sleep, like, fantastic, let's put that at the top of the list. And then if your weight changes, like, bonus if you were secretly hoping for that.
Yeah.
But if that's at the top of the list, it gets messy.
Yeah.
So within that same vein, that kind of just, ask and answers my question.
Yeah.
Is an ideal weight something that we should be striving towards?
It's a really good question, because I think there's a lot of misconception around that, especially because we've all had the doctor's appointment where we go and they give you the printout on the way out and it says your BMI and it tells you what category you're in, right? Normal weight, underweight, over, whatever. The thing with ideal weight, I like to reframe it and say everybody has their own ideal weight. I can't guess what that is for any one person, right? Because genetics, our build, even like our background, like if we grew up doing sports, we might have more dense bones, we might have more muscle mass, right? There's all these things that determine what a comfortable, safe, healthy, optimal weight for my body is that makes it very different than for yours.
Yeah.
Even if we're the same height or the same gender.
Yeah. That's totally true. Totally true. And There was like the topic of weight cycling and what that means, like gaining weight, losing weight, and how does that affect your body, and what have you seen in your clients and everything with that?
Yeah, so this concept of weight cycling, where we are gaining and then losing, or vice versa, X amount of weight over and over, we're starting to find, as we do more research in like that, it's called health at every size realm, right? So the less weight stigmatizing research in the medical field, we're starting to see that yo-yo effect on our weight has a lot of really negative health implications that we used to just assume were connected to a higher body weight, right? So when we're told, being at this weight causes cardiovascular disease or causes chronic inflammation or whatever it is, what we're starting to find is we can control for BMI, smoking, a lot of different things, and just look at the weight cycling and we still see the same negative health outcomes. So,
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
so that idea of, every spring I lose 25 pounds for summer, but then by the fall I've gained it back, it's probably making you less healthy, not more healthy.
Okay, so if you're going back and forth from that 25, it's like you're still going to be at risk for endocardiovascular diseases and everything. And
Absolutely, all that. Because your body loves to maintain homeostasis, right? It's like the idea that, I forget who it is now because I've been out of the game for a little bit, but like I think it's Tom Brady that does the diet with like the alkaline foods and drinks like the super alkaline water or something. Your stomach pH stays within like a 0.2 no matter what you do, no matter what you eat. Your body loves homeostasis, right? That like thermostat mechanism of I'm always going to bring it back to a certain place. Same thing happens with our weight. Yeah. So if we are restricting heavily, our body is going to upregulate ghrelin, our hunger hormone. It's going to down-regulate our fullness hormones. Eventually, it's going to pull you back to your personal ideal weight, right? That set weight. Yeah. And trying to fight that tends to be really taxing on your body. And that's where we see those negative health outcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read a quote that I saw on your page
today. Quote me to me.
Your body does not know the difference between intentional restriction and true starvation.
Exactly.
I saw that and I immediately thought about intermittent fasting, which I used to do, and I did it for about a year and a half, and I liked it, and I saw results. But how would you elaborate on that? Because that is an amazing statement. So
thank you.
Kind of share with us what brought that about and that thought process.
Yeah, so that's, you've been doing this for a little bit. Very good segue, because that really piggybacks off that last question we were talking about, right? It's the idea that when you intentionally restrict below the amount of energy or calories that your body would like to operate off of, it doesn't know that you're doing it because you feel pressured to be a size 4 instead of an 8 right now, right? It doesn't know that. It just knows it's getting less energy than it would like to have, right? And so what we see is people's metabolism downregulating, and not just in the sense of I burn less calories, but our bodies will start to downregulate the less essential functions that they do to compensate for us consuming less calories. And so when they did that, I think it was, I can't remember what decade it was in, but it was a long time ago because it's not ethical. So we can't do it anymore. But when they did that Minnesota starvation study, they took a bunch of normal weight males and cut their caloric intake by 50%.
Oh, wow.
And they kept them there for I think 6 months. Don't quote me on this. I haven't read it in a while.
Oh, wow.
But their bodies, that was starvation, right?
Yeah.
And their bodies did a lot of crazy things to fight said starvation. So when we are intentionally putting ourselves on some level of a starvation diet, our bodies are just going to fight back against it, right? That's really all it is, because it doesn't know, oh, I'm doing this on purpose. There is food in the pantry. I just am doing this because I want to be smaller, right? And so all those homeostatic mechanisms kick in, whether we are intentionally doing that to ourselves or not.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I can't imagine how much that would affect, their mental health too.
Oh, yeah.
Did they see a lot with that study, or did they focus on that? Okay.
Yeah, and obviously this was done a while back when mental health, our capacity to quantify mental health probably wasn't as good as it is now. Yeah. But one thing that they did see, I remember that was really interesting, is the participants report of how frequently they were thinking about food or how strong their emotions were around food went way up.
Wow.
Went up.
And so that's just, I mean, that's a sign, right? That
Yeah.
your brain doesn't know I'm cutting these calories because I want to be. It just knows like, oh, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
This isn't fun. This isn't going well. I'm going to think about food more so that he goes and grabs a snack.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's interesting how food has such an impact on your mental health and everything. Josh, you have a question?
But would intermittent fasting actually be starvation like he was referring to, just skipping breakfast?
So there's an element of it, right? Starvation is that's a word I use on social media because it gets people thinking about it. It gets you reading it, right?
Yeah.
It can be perceived that way, right? Obviously if you are intermittent fasting, but you are still eating a comfortable amount of calories for what your body needs, then long term, you're probably not going to see as many negative effects of doing IF as if you said, oh, I'm going to slash my calories by intermittent fasting. Because eventually that chronic deficit is going to change those hunger hormones. It might change your cortisol levels, stuff like that, right? Versus this timing works for me and I'm just going to expand how long I wait till I eat, but I'm still going to eat enough calories for my body to function well.
Nutrients.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on like what the angle is that you're taking it with.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I wonder, with the starvation and everything, in that study that they did, they were starving the people and they had less calories, but it makes me wonder because I know like if you're eating like empty calories, like full of carbs, lack of nutrients and vitamins and everything, and you still like crave more junk food and more junk food. Do you see, like, has there been any studies that have shown there's, like, a correlation with that too? Because, a lot of Americans eat a lot of empty carbs and it's full of carbs and fat and less nutrients because it's fast food. So what do you see with that?
Yeah. So there's definitely a piece of that argument that's like based in the physical and like what's happening to our bodies, right? So if we are consuming calories that are pretty devoid of the nutrients that take longer to digest, like fat, protein, and fiber, we are going to feel hungry more often than is in balance with the amount of calories we're eating and think we need more. Whereas we might already have satisfied our body's energy needs for the day, but physically we just don't feel satisfied, right? Yeah. So there's definitely an aspect of that. And then something else that I find when people are feeling really shameful and like guilty around the choices they're making, it actually kind of puts us in this cycle where we're reaching for those foods more. Yeah. Because a lot of us don't have coping skills outside of food. Right. For a lot of us, that's one of our primary coping skills.
Emotional eating and everything.
Yep. And so you know that you're ingesting these empty calories and you feel badly for it. And then the next day you self-soothe with the same thing.
Yeah. Right? I noticed that personally because I'm a flight nurse and I do 24-hour shifts. Yeah. So when we're up all night and I don't get a lot of sleep, the next day I'm craving so much more food and sweets and everything. And I'm just tired. I just need to sleep. But I'm like, I'm hungry. I want chocolate and everything. And do you see that with your clients?
Yeah. So I even see it in my personal life. My husband, right, when he doesn't sleep either.
Oh, yeah, because your husband's
shift.
A firefighter, so he works 24s.
So I know that life that you're, well, I don't, but I see it. But yeah, there's actually an element of sleep deprivation changing our perception of our hunger and fullness hormones and affecting kind of which ones are turned on or off. Yeah. And so sometimes there's an element of less sleep is physiologically taxing and therefore more calories will help to offset some of that stress. But then there's also the emotional part of it, right? Yeah. So yeah, they both kind of play in there.
Play a part in that. Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy how much like the importance of like sleep is so important in so many ways. It's just crazy.
I know. Well, and it's when you think about health, like we were talking about before we started recording even, right? It's health is not just like what you eat or just how you move or just your weight. It's all of these different things like your mental health, your sleep, your social health. That's why a lot of times when I work with clients who are trying to come off of really disordered eating or dieting, I'm like, what if we pictured your health as all of these things? Like food is part of it. Yes. But if your social health, your relational health, your sleep, your physical health, like your workouts, if they're all being compromised by the way you're eating, Just like if they were all being compromised by the way you're sleeping,
Yeah.
like then you're not as healthy as you think you are.
Yeah.
Right?
And it is a really good, it's, good to aim for a balance of everything because you're going to feel better, like overall.
Yeah.
And everything. Awesome. And then also, what do you think about, like, if somebody, like we were kind of mentioning earlier, you're hungry for sweets or you're hungry for something salty. Are those like really internal cues? Are they external cues? And like, how do you decipher between, sometimes if you're out all summer outside working and you're sweating and everything, and then you crave salt. Well, that makes sense. But, how do you know if you're actually craving nutrients you need versus like, kind of what you're seeing out there available?
Yeah. Yeah. Like seeing the ads for the salty things versus needing the salt. So short answer is you can't fully know, right? You can use your logic to kind of look and say, I wonder, maybe I haven't gotten a lot of this nutrient recently, but also I'm not sure because I don't have a calculator in my head for that, right? Sometimes it just is you're craving something salty because that sounds damn good, right?
Yes.
And so that's where the more of like the intuitive eating work that I do with clients comes in, where it's like, let's remove the emotional charge from food and remove kind of the guilt from food so that whether you are craving salt because you just sweat out a ton of sodium working out in the yard, not my favorite thing, but it happens.
Yes.
Or you're craving sodium because it just sounds so good today and you saw multiple fast food ads and you're like, man, I can get my hands on some chips right now.
Yeah.
Either is okay, right? It's just about balancing out your choices, just like in any part of your health.
Yeah.
You heard that too. She said it was okay.
It is.
It's
okay.
Don't judge me.
Right? And better yet, if you don't judge yourself, you're going to be able to eat that serving of salty food and move
honey,
on.
I never judge
right?
myself.
Good, Nathan. But yeah, then you can just move on, right? And it's just, it continues to be a normal day. It's not, well, I ate that one food and so now who cares for the rest of the week, and like this spiral.
Yeah.
Right? It's just, it sounded good. Maybe my body needed it. Maybe my brain needed it. Either way, I had it. I keep going. Right?
Yeah.
We talk about the judging and trying to maintain this, like we were talking about the ideal weight, and that kind of thing. Actors, athletes, these people who will be on social media and they'll be like, "Oh, look at this! I'm eating one piece of lettuce and drinking, 17 gallons of water a day, and then like I'm gonna have a cheat day. I'm gonna eat 13 pizzas." And it's just like, is there? What are the benefits, if any, of having a cheat day?
Yeah, so I would argue there's not really a benefit. Only because, right, if you are classifying that day as a cheat day, what happens if 3 days prior you really wanted a couple slices of pizza and you denied it to yourself? Chances are you're going to eat way more of it when you finally get it, right? And that's not going to feel good. You're probably not going to feel your best after that.
Right.
And mentally too, you're probably going to feel like you're going to beat yourself up for it more, right? Versus if you can accept that like cravings are a normal part of eating, right? Obviously, if we are only following our cravings, then we're likely not providing our body with all of the nutrients it needs, but working those into your everyday like style of eating feels a lot more aligned. It doesn't feel as jarring. It doesn't feel like I'm saving up for that day, right? It just starts to feel normal.
Yeah, it feels very robotic.
Yes.
To live a lifestyle that says, I want a certain look and I want to maintain that look, but it's really unreasonable, in my opinion, to think that way. And it doesn't make sense to, like you said, instead of having a cheat day where I'm going to stuff a bunch of food in my face, I'm cheating my body out of those things that it wants, as long as I do it in moderation. That's one of the things that I've tried to do myself, is just everything in moderation. I love cheeseburgers. I'm going to stuff myself with a cheeseburger. I work out every day too. So I think there's a healthy balance. Now, I probably shouldn't eat so many cheeseburgers. But, and the other thing too is like I work right next to Marco's.
It's not easy.
Yeah, I know. It's not easy.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
And then Sweetwater's coffee and the really good coffee drinks.
And by the way, why isn't a cup of coffee equal to breakfast?
Oh, you saw that one too?
Saw that one.
I did a deep dive on my Instagram.
I did.
Yeah.
I did research.
Yeah. So one reason that I'm like, coffee for breakfast is not the move is because caffeine is going to suppress your appetite, right? So I work with people who, I can think of this one client who I love right now, who doesn't have a period, right? She's an athlete. She's what we call amenorrheic because she is not consuming enough energy, but she genuinely feels like, well, I'm eating when I'm hungry and I'm stopping when I'm full. But she starts off her day with a venti coffee. And so by 1, she's like, okay, I'm full now, or I'm hungry now, right?
Right.
But her body's already been hoping for some energy, for some calories since she got up at 6. So messing with your hunger and fullness cues is one reason. Coffee on an empty stomach is like not ideal.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is it's not great from like a hormonal balance standpoint. So our cortisol is highest in the morning naturally, and then adding caffeine in on an empty stomach without other nutrients to kind of be absorbed with it doesn't help with that rise.
And then you get that crash
Yep.
midday or sometimes earlier if you have too much.
Is that why I'm shaking and have a headache?
Yes. It's like I've seen the memes where people are, they feel terrible. They're like, why do I have a headache? What's going on? I'm Googling, is it, a brain tumor? And your body's like, it's the 3rd iced coffee you ate or you drank before you ate. Like
It's not a tumor.
it's just too much coffee. But yeah, definitely something I try to move my clients away from if I can.
Okay.
Not ideal.
Yeah. So tell me what like a typical session looks like between you and a client. Whenever you're looking at their diet, maybe this is somebody who's not like a athlete, but just a everyday person.
Sure.
And they're kind of on the standard American diet, and kind of like, how does that work with them? Like, is it like a full okay, we completely change your diet from the start, or do you kind of do a slow, gradual process, or how does that look like?
Yeah, so I would say definitely more on the slow, gradual process side of things.
Okay.
My initial sessions with clients end up being a lot more about their relationship with food than tell me exactly how you eat.
Yeah.
Because if I know here is where they're feeling guilty about food. Here's where they're feeling frustrated. Here's where they're feeling chaotic, missing meals, whatever. We can work on that a lot more without me saying these foods are good and these foods are bad and you should swap this for that.
Yeah.
Right? Because at the end of the day, that's me driving their habits. And once I'm not in the driver's seat anymore, those habits are going to change, right?
Yeah.
They're going to go back to what they were doing
Right.
before. So I really try to understand their motivation behind it. Even too, how much they value some of these things, right? If energy is really important for them because they have a super busy job and they're like, I will change anything about my diet to not bonk out at 2. Great. Now when we talk about changes, I can speak to it from that thing that matters to them.
Yeah.
Right? Versus me putting my dietitian hat on and being like, well, the saturated fat content in your diet, they're out, right? They're going to log off the Zoom and they're going to say their Wi-Fi cut out. So yeah, really looking more at values and motivation and the ebb and flow of their day and all of that.
Yeah.
And then we'll get a little bit more nitty gritty as we get to know each other. And if they have more specific performance goals or if we're working on lab work or that kind of stuff. But yeah, to start, it's very much more understanding the why more so than the what, and then we will slowly start to make those changes.
Yeah, I like that. That's good because it seems like, I guess growing up and seeing different adults in my life, family members, and they were like, I'm going to start this fad diet. And it was maybe a month or maybe 3 months, and then it was back to, just good old Southern home cooked meals and stuff, and which is good, but it doesn't put enough nutrients in your body, and it doesn't fuel you, and you're not getting to your goals and to be healthy and energetic and everything. So it's interesting to see for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's why a lot of times, I think this was the first question or 2 that we talked about.
Yeah.
A lot of times when a client comes to me and says, I think that weight loss is the very top priority, we're like, okay, can we reprioritize that list a little?
Yeah.
Not saying I want to change their mind, but I want to help them dig a little deeper.
Yes.
Because if not, it is going to just be, I go on the fad diet for a month or 2, and then I go right back because I didn't get to any of the underlying stuff.
Right.
Any of those motivations, any of those things that really make me feel proud and accomplished and I'm making progress.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and what you eat and the food you put in your body, it should be energizing you and fueling you for the day and stuff. And to me, that should be a priority and everything. So.
Right. Yeah. Both in quality, like you were talking about with your, family and stuff. And then also in the energy content. Like calories are literally a unit of energy. So when I
Yes.
have clients say, I want to go on a low calorie diet, I reframe it and I say, you mean a low energy diet,
Yeah.
right? Like, because that's how it's going to feel,
Yeah.
right? Maybe not initially, but eventually.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely. Do you ever work with clients that maybe have a big family and kids and they're trying to eat healthy? Do you encourage everybody to start eating healthy, or maybe them make like a separate meal? Or because I have kids myself and my husband and everything, and sometimes like for dinner, kind of what I personally do is I'll make we usually have like lean meat, like chicken, or I like fish, but y'all don't like fish, and do like a vegetable and some type of carb and everything, and
Probably some quinoa.
But the kids and my husband usually eat more of the carbs, and I eat a little bit, and then just more vegetables, just because I'm like, maybe that's a little bit too much. But my kids are teenagers and they're growing and they're athletes and everything. So like, how do you help your customer or your clients that have families and and then are trying to prepare meals for everybody too, like moms and stuff? So and dads, but
right, yeah. So a lot of times, if my clients do have families that they are having to consider when it's mealtime, if they've got a really wide range of nutrient needs, right? Like you've got a teenage athlete and you've got a toddler and you've got you and all this, then as long as you're making stuff that everybody likes and that they can more or less choose their own portions on, we're going to be good.
Okay.
Right? When we're making a like combo meal that is like heavily protein and vegetables, and then telling your, 16-year-old who runs track, like figure it out, like he's not gonna be able to get enough carbs out of that meal.
Yeah.
Right? So
Right.
as long as there's an element of everybody respects that you're starting to make different choices with your food and they're not making meal times hard on you and nagging you. Because if they are, that's something we can work on. And if there's a little bit of flexibility built into the meal, usually it means you don't have to create a whole separate thing just because you've started to prioritize your nutrition. It might, but it usually doesn't have to go that way.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Awesome. Well, Josh has another question. So
Give him the
come on,
mic.
Josh.
So do you find there's so many different opinions on the same thing? So like some
Yes.
people will go carnivore diet, or some people will go veganism. And I've got friends personally that have, improved their quality of life by the carnivore diet, and someone on an autoimmune disease that veganism helped them. And it's so hard to find studies. Like, what do you think all the discrepancies about?
what I would guess the discrepancy is primarily about is it is almost impossible to study all of the cumulative effects of dietary choices on long-term health, right? Because we can't just put people in a lab for the next 14 years and control their food that heavily.
Yeah.
So really, all we have really quality science on is like the general like energy balance type of stuff, right? If you're eating too many calories, too few, whatever, we know a decent amount about those effects. We know about very specific nutrients, but that cumulative effect of the whole dietary ecosystem that you choose to put yourself in, that's really, really hard for us to know. Like we don't have a predictable outcome for that. So the reason there are such differing opinions is we have such a variety of beliefs, genetics, right? Like our background, if we have medical conditions going on already, all those things likely influence how food feels for us, whether mentally or physically, right? So what I always tell my clients is ideally when we're working together, like I would love if you don't decide like time to do the carnivore diet, right? Just because there are so many other things we can work on with your relationship with food before you jump to such a specific choice, right? Like a kind of a narrow choice. But that doesn't mean that adding more vegetables or adding more protein or like isn't going to make you feel better, right? So I don't think anybody's wrong when they say I'm eating this diet and I feel better. But I also wonder, could you have done 50% of those changes and like gotten a little bit of your time back and not had to be so specific and still ended up feeling a lot healthier? Does that make sense? Because it's so individual. Diet is always going to be so individual because we can't like study it in a test tube.
Yeah, it is. And everybody, like there's that book, Diet for Your Blood Type, and, this and that. But it I think it can be individual needs and everything. Like what works good for me is not necessarily going to work good for Nathan.
It definitely does not.
It definitely does not.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
You got to have your cheeseburgers.
No, actually, I mess with Nicole a lot, but she does. The meals that she prepares that are healthy are delicious.
Yeah.
Aw, thank you.
And that's such like a misconception, right? That like if it's healthy, it's going to be boring.
Yeah.
It doesn't have
You
to
know,
be.
True. There's
No.
spices you can add.
People who don't understand how good food is make those kinds of statements.
That's very true. But yeah, it's just food is it's so personal, right? Like on that like emotional side and that social side, but even when it comes down to the physical and the genetics and like how does my metabolism or digestive system, like, oh my gosh, so much we still don't know about that, like how gut health plays a role. So there's a lot of reasons why one person would do something and feel amazing and another would and be like, never doing that again.
Yeah. And I know like years ago I started reading about like the different inflammatory foods and stuff like that. And personally, I do try to cut out a lot of inflammatory foods, and I feel better. So I don't know if it's just me or, a mental thing. But it's interesting because we do have a couple friends who are on very extreme diets. Like one is vegan and they feel so much better and energetic and everything. And then the other one is on a carnivore diet. But I'm looking at that and I'm like, is that because they're both cutting out a lot of inflammatory foods and not realizing it, like dairy and gluten and everything like that? And, I know a lot of people have different opinions on, inflammatory. Do you ever have to focus on that or anything, or what do you think?
Not a ton. The only time we really would dig into that is like when I have athletes who are post-surgery or if I have someone who does blood work and they've got high CRP or something.
Okay. Yeah.
But usually there's a lot that we'll do more in like the side of like sleep and stress and hormonal management before we assume like certain foods are going to do it. But once you've got all those things dialed in, right, if you did, then maybe layering on more of those like targeted food choices, it gives you that extra like level.
Extra boost and everything. And CRP is C-reactive protein.
Oh,
it's
sorry.
You're good. It's just a lot of people probably don't know what that is. And it's released whenever you're stressed, right? Or there's inflammation.
And I mean, and there are so many processes that are inflammatory in our body, right? Even exercise, which we're like, that's so good for you. That causes inflammation for a period of time. But it's just one of those markers of systemic inflammation, basically.
Yeah. Well, cool. So tell us more about how to find out more about you and your business and everything. If somebody wants to sign up or kind of reach out to you and maybe become a client.
For sure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. So right now we are all virtual, based in, the Dallas, Texas area. But I can see clients in a lot of different states. There's some licensure stuff when we get into certain medical conditions. But overall, if you wanted to find me, learn from me, connect, learn about being a client, I'm on Instagram at Fueled and Well. And then I have a website with the same name. So just fueledandwell.com. But we work with clients, one-on-one. We have group coaching. We have lots of different options.
Cool. That's awesome. Your Instagram page is really cool looking. Thanks. And it just full of information and everything like Nathan was saying. So
So if you want to stalk her, it'd be worth it because she's super smart.
Well, thank you.
Well, thank you, Brittany, for being on our show.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. See y'all next time.